Hi, this is a continuation. Got distracted by my family there in the middle of the interpreting, so we're continuing with VP-2 with Brenda's comments. She said, I realized at that point that it's my right to have interpreters. I didn't know at the time that I had the right to complain, but now I know better. I certainly do. Remember, in the past, interpreters were not under an agency. They were just freelance, so there was nobody to complain to. I guess you could have complained to some sort of Better Business Bureau or something, but I didn't realize that you could. Another interesting experience, actually positive experience with an interpreter, was when I was in college taking a class at Western Maryland University, and I remember the teacher showed up, very professional. Her hair was up and glasses, and she had an interpreter that was there as well, both of them women, I should say. And as the class went on, the teacher's demeanor changed. Very subtle, but it was a shift to a more African style. I should say she was African American. She was more fluid and more sort of street, I guess, in her delivery. And the interpreter was able to copy this affect pretty much to a T. It was fascinating how she was able to follow this shift in the professor's demeanor. So one day I took it upon myself to ask the teacher. I said, look, you were very professional and very kind of demure on the first day of class, and now you're much more sort of African in your style, and it's very interesting. I like it, but I'm just wondering what your take is on that. And the teacher sort of chuckled and said, yes, it's true. Here at the college, people sort of look down on us if we're too, say, ethnic on our first day. So I know I have to start the semester being much more professional than I can later on. And I actually did purposely sort of change my style to see if you guys would catch it. And I should tell you, this was a sociology course, so that was part of the class to be able to catch that. And they meaning the teacher and the interpreter, worked together many times to coordinate this, to make sure that particular shift in style was conveyed in the interpretation. I was really impressed with that. This is question 3. Now we're seeing many more people, especially hearing people, that want to become interpreters. As a deaf person, what do you think are the most important things that you have to convey to these new interpreters? Mark's saying, well, I think to improve their skills, I think they have to develop a good awareness of what their weaknesses are and what their strengths are, and then be able to learn from that and accept the weaknesses and be willing to develop. I think that goes back to the idea of attitude, and attitude being a very important part of any interpreter's skill set. Having the idea of like, oh, I know this already. No, they need to realize that they don't know things. And there are a lot of things as people that we don't know, and that the more we're willing to admit that, the more our skills are able to flourish. Being honest with each other instead of saying, oh, I know everything. No. I think, there are, of course, we might be aware of some things, but it's important for us to acknowledge what we don't know about and learn from that, and then we can begin to have less errors and miscommunication in our interpreting based on that. This is Jenny saying, really, certification is the key. That's the best. I find that certification is the best. Of course, following the code of ethics, that's what interpreters need to be most concerned with. Now David's saying, think when it comes to interpreters, I think they need to be not so impartial, be able to convey or get feedback, and be able to accept constructive criticism. Like if an interpreter, if a a deaf person says, "Look, you have a spot on your shirt," or "I can't see because of those clothes," not take it so personally. I think that's important. You know, interpreters certainly have to keep boundaries, but not necessarily be so strict with the boundary between interpreter and consumer. I think they need to be able to cross that and be more comfortable. Now, a lot of interpreters, they are very skilled. It's very important. And they need to know ASL, the rules of ASL, the rules and linguistic rules of grammar, but also deaf culture is very important. A lot of times they know the language but not the culture, and I feel like that's an indication of not showing respect to the community. I'm not sure who to blame for that, whether it's the educators of these new interpreters or the interpreters themselves, but they need to be interacting and socializing with deaf people, not just coming in and doing their job and leaving the community when they're finished, but they need to understand deaf people, and the way to understand deaf people is by being around them, interacting with them, using the language in daily life. I think that is the key. This is Ed's response. The most important thing is to really know the deaf community as a culture. And the way you get that is to be involved with the community, maybe through organizations, or even, to be honest, find a deaf partner, a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That's one way to really get into the culture and to be 24/7 in the culture. You know, if you want to learn about a foreign country, you go to that country and you live there. And that's the best way to do it. There's no difference between that and learning about deaf people and deaf culture. If you want to be an interpreter, you have to be a part of the deaf family in the community. This is question 4. Suppose you have an important business meeting that you need to go to, and you have 2 different types of interpreters that you can choose from. One would be someone who is not so skilled as an interpreter, but whose attitude and professionalism is something you can easily trust. The other choice would be someone who is a very highly skilled interpreter, but whose professionalism is not so leaves a lot to be desired. Of these 2 interpreter types, which would you prefer to work with? Mark's saying, I would like to, I think, work primarily with an interpreter who is professional, who I can trust to not share personal information in the community. And the reason I say that is that we need to have someone who's going to help protect our name and our reputation in the community. If an interpreter has a lot of skill without professionalism, and they could be trained to that, I would use them. If there's somebody who's maybe not such a great interpreter, I kind of wish I could put the 2 together, the 2 good qualities of each of these interpreters, to create a hybrid interpreter that would have the best of both. David's saying it depends on the situation. If I were to go to a doctor's appointment and I find the interpreter has no certification, I don't know how I'd feel about that. I guess I would go ahead with that interpreter. If it was a serious situation, I would actually prefer to just write notes with the individual rather than even having an interpreter who I couldn't trust. If it wasn't a very important meeting, I guess it would be fine to have somebody who didn't follow the code of ethics. But if it's a very serious, I would rather have someone, to be honest, who has both those skills, both the interpreting and the professionalism. Brenda's saying, okay, well, let me see how I'm going to answer this. I guess it would depend on the situation. If it was a doctor's office, no. I would want a good interpreter and somebody who is confidential, who follows the code of ethics. I need both of those skill sets. It's a very sensitive situation, so of course I would want somebody who has all of that. But for an everyday kind of a thing, I guess I'm worried, I don't want somebody who's going to think that it's my fault. I don't want them to blame me. I'm not sure how it would, be. I would feel like I would have to handle the communication and, make sure things are going the right way. Look, I feel like if someone is paying for this interpreter, it needs to be somebody who has both professionalism and the skill of being a good interpreter. I also want to make sure that the interpreter, if there is an error made, they're going to take the blame for it and say, look, it's the interpreter at fault, so people realize it's not me that's miscommunicating. Ed saying, I guess I would pick someone who was qualified without so much professionalism, but now I guess if it's related to professional work like psychological counseling, I would definitely want an interpreter who is going to abide by the code of ethics, who could be trusted, and someone who we don't have to be concerned with if there's liability issues. I would prefer, clear communication, of course, but if it's a serious professional code of ethics kind of issue, I would have to warn them, look, I don't want any misunderstandings, I don't want any miscommunication, and I need you to be highly skilled and professional. Marilyn's saying, oh boy, this is a sticky situation. It's kind of a hard question to answer, but I guess I'd have to say, I would have to say, look, we have to find a better interpreter that has both of these things, that's confidential and skilled. If we don't have anybody with both of these skill sets, I would just actually cancel the meeting. I would not proceed. I need an interpreter. I'm not going to be someone who's going to suffer through anybody who is less than qualified.